Sullivan's Crossing may be heading into one of its most emotional episodes of the entire season, because Episode 8 does not feel like a chapter where people simply talk through their problems. It feels like the moment those problems stop sitting quietly in the background and finally start changing lives. Relationships are under pressure. Old emotions are getting harder to ignore, and the closer this season gets to its end, the more it feels like somebody is going to make a decision that cannot be undone. Hey, what's up everyone? Come back to break down Epic. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Now, based on everything we know so far, Sullivan's Crossing Season 4 Episode 8 looks like it is going to focus heavily on emotional fallout, especially when it comes to Maggie, Cal, and Liam. And honestly, I think that is the right direction for the show right now. This season has been slowly building tension between these characters for a while, and at some point that tension has to lead somewhere. Episode 8 feels like the episode where all that quiet pressure starts turning into something much more serious.
Let's start with Maggie and Cal, because that relationship is clearly not in a stable place anymore. What makes this situation interesting is that the issue no longer feels like one simple misunderstanding. It feels like layers of stress, old emotional baggage, and unspoken fears are all piling on top of each other. They still care about one another, that part is obvious, but caring and connecting are not always the same thing. And right now it feels like they are struggling to actually reach each other in the way they used to. In my opinion, that is what makes Episode 8 so important. This is no longer about asking whether Maggie and Cal are having a rough patch. It feels more like the show is asking whether they are still capable of building the future they thought they wanted together. That is a much bigger question. Once a relationship starts slipping into emotional distance, every conversation matters more, every silence matters more, and every small disagreement starts carrying much more weight than it should. For Maggie, I think this episode could force some real self-reflection. She may have to stop thinking about what she should want and finally confront what she actually wants. Those are not always the same thing. And if the show really wants to push her character forward, this is the kind of episode where she needs to face that honestly.
Then there is Cal. What I find really compelling about Cal's side of this is that he does not seem like a character who would easily give up on something meaningful. So if there is distance growing between him and Maggie, then that probably means he is carrying a lot more hurt and frustration than he is saying out loud. Personally, I think quiet pain is often more dangerous than loud conflict in shows like this, because it builds slowly until there's no way to ignore it anymore. That is why I would not be surprised if Episode 8 gives Cal a scene where he either finally opens up or reaches a point where holding everything in is no longer possible. And if that happens, it could be one of the strongest emotional moments of the season. Now let's talk about Liam, because his decision to stay changes the entire emotional balance of the story. If Liam was only passing through, then maybe some of these tensions could have faded on their own, but by staying, he becomes part of the everyday reality at the crossing. That means his presence is no longer just a memory returning or a temporary complication. It becomes something everyone has to live with. And that creates a completely different kind of pressure. For Maggie, Liam staying nearby makes emotional clarity much harder. For Cal, it turns an uncomfortable situation into an ongoing one. And for the rest of the town, it means old history is not going away quietly. It is staying in the room with everyone.
In my personal opinion, this is what makes Liam's choice so important. It may not look dramatic on the surface, but it changes the energy of every future interaction. When someone tied to unresolved feelings decides not to leave, then every silence gets heavier, and every choice becomes more loaded. Episode 8 also feels like the kind of chapter where the crossing itself may start feeling less peaceful than usual. This show often uses the setting as an emotional contrast. The town looks calm, the scenery feels comforting, but beneath that calm, people are carrying heartbreak, jealousy, confusion, and regret. When the writing leans into that contrast, it usually works really well. And I think this episode could do exactly that. What I expect most from episode 8 is not a giant twist for the sake of shock. I think the real power of this episode will come from difficult conversations and emotional decisions. A relationship may not completely break in one scene, but one moment can still change the direction of everything. That is what this episode feels like to me. A turning point. Not because of some huge event, but because the characters may finally be forced to stop avoiding the truth. So overall, I think Sullivan's Crossing Season 4, Episode 8 is shaping up to be one of the most important episodes of the season. Maggie and Cal feel like they are standing at a crossroads. Liam's presence is making everything more complicated, and whatever happens next may decide which bonds survive and which ones do not. But anyway, that is my breakdown of Sullivan's Crossing Season 4, Episode 8. And what I think could happen next. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Maggie and Cal can still fix things? Or has Liam's decision to stay already changed everything for good? I will catch you in the next one.